Yo, what is up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about auto rifles in Destiny 2, specifically the 600 RPM such as Hardlight or Source Regime, and the Summoner, which is the Charles auto rifle, and we're going to be comparing them with 140 hand cannons. Now 140 hand cannons are going to be your Austringers, your Ace of Spades. Now these hand cannons unfortunately don't get very much love, I feel like. They've never really been meta as far as console is concerned. We've had 150s, we've had 180s on console, but we've never really had 140s kind of shine in the meta at any time. So, and also want to talk about how it's so difficult to really use anything else in the game besides auto rifles. And 140s are a prime example of that. If you look at the time to kill for 140 hand cannons versus 600 RPM auto rifles, it does have a 0.1 second faster time to kill, optimal time to kill that is. Now, the thing that's troubling about that is with all the buffs that we've had to auto rifles, especially the 600 RPM, and now we're going to have another buff to the slower rate of fire auto rifles, such as the Dan. It seems like hand cannons keep getting more and more pushed out of the meta, and then auto rifles are pretty much the only thing left over. You know, if you like using auto rifles, that's great. Personally, I don't. I'm not saying that auto rifles should be bad. I'm not saying that it's bad to use auto rifles, but to me it's very concerning when you don't really have too many options as far as the meta goes, and you're kind of forced to use one thing, which is kind of how it feels like with Source Regime and Hardlight and the Summoner and pretty much any 600 RPM auto rifle, especially in more competitive modes like Trials of Osiris, Survival, and Iron Banner. It really feels like you're pretty limited in what you can use, especially since pretty much everyone is running auto rifles almost non-stop because of how good they are, and I don't blame them for using it. Of course they're going to use it because it's what's the meta, it's what Bungie decided to make the best option for PvP at this time, so of course it's what everyone's going to use. But it becomes an issue when you're playing for months and months and months and you're wanting to go into Crucible for a new experience, but you never get that since you never have the option to use anything else, since everything else isn't as strong as the 600 RPM auto rifles. Like I said, 140s, for example, they have a slower time to kill, they're much less forgiving, whereas the auto rifles, they are a lot more forgiving. You can miss shots and still get the kill. All you have to do is just lay on the trigger, and that's about it. Just point and shoot. It's pretty simple. Especially with Source Regime. Source Regime, when it's all the way spun up, gets a 0.5 time to kill. So if you're pre-firing or if you're in a gunfight with two people and you're able to get one down, when you switch over to the other guy, you're going to have a much faster time to kill. So it's very difficult to use anything else, especially on console. It might be a little bit different on PC, I'm not entirely sure. I only play on console. Unfortunately on console, there really isn't much of an option to use anything else, especially in the competitive game modes. A lot of the gameplay you see today, pretty much all from Classic Mix or just the Clash playlist. And so you'll see some gameplay of me running around with a hand cannon with an Austringer, and then I also got some footage of me playing with Ace of Spades. I was actually having a lot of fun with Ace of Spades. I didn't think it was as good as it was, but of course it wasn't in a skill-based matchmaking playlist, so keep that in mind, that when you watch that gameplay, I'm not playing against a lot of good players. Sure, there was a few good players, but most of them were not the best PvP players. So it allowed me to use things like Ace of Spades and Austringer without getting completely punished for it, because the people I was playing against, they either weren't using the meta or they might just not have had a lot of experience in PvP, and so it wasn't extremely difficult to get some clips. So definitely keep that in mind while watching the footage. So my ideal PvP meta would be a meta where you can use pretty much whatever you want and be able to compete with it. I don't think it's right for only one option or only two options to be viable in PvP. I think you should be able to use hand cannons, auto rifles, scout rifles, pulse rifles, and be successful in PvP. And this has been an issue literally since Destiny 1. And the reason for that is because in Destiny, we do have a lot of different archetypes for weapons. We don't just have hand cannons, and then we don't just have auto rifles. There's a lot of different archetypes for each one of those categories, and so it could be difficult to balance things out. You don't want anything too good. Everything should have some sort of drawback in a way so that it's not overpowered. And I think the issue with auto rifles right now is that there pretty much is no drawback to using them. All you have to do is point and click and hold on the trigger. You don't have to readjust your aim very much. They have a ton of range now, more range than hand cannons, I believe. And that has more to do with the blanket nerf that Bungie gave hand cannons a while ago, which has caused pretty much every single archetype of hand cannons to suffer. You know, 110s and 140s, they don't shine whatsoever on console, whereas auto rifles, and when I say auto rifles, I really mean just the 600 RPM, because I know a lot of other auto rifles aren't that great right now. Soon a lot more will be though, and it kind of seems like we're taking 2 steps backwards, since right now we have an option for auto rifles. If you want to use an auto rifle, you could use a 600 RPM, but there isn't really a viable option for pretty much anything else. If you want to use a hand cannon in comp, what are you going to use? Or in trials, what are you going to use? Like, you could try to use Not Forgotten if you wanted to. In my opinion, Not Forgotten is the best hand cannon still, and it doesn't even hold up with 600 RPM auto rifles. So that's not even an option, and that's the best hand cannon in the game, in my opinion at least. There's no drawbacks to using an auto rifle, a 600 RPM auto rifle, over Not Forgotten, which is the pinnacle weapon for PvP. Like, what's the point in even getting the gun now if it's not even going to compete in the playlist that you're working so hard to get it in? It might as well not even be an option to get, because it's literally useless at this point. With all that to say, guys, I really hope that Bungie takes into consideration that not everyone wants to use an auto rifle in PvP. Auto rifles should be able to compete with everything else, but they shouldn't be the only option. I get really tired of using an auto rifle. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun. There needs to be more options. Bungie, if you're watching this, please consider everyone else playing in the Crucible that doesn't want to use an auto rifle, that wants to go into comp or into trials or into Iron Banner and just wants to use something else. It doesn't have to be a hand cannon, doesn't have to be, you know, a bow, but something else. But that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video and want to support it, definitely consider giving it a like button and sharing it, and subscribe to the channel for more content.